So in the last episode, we talked to an organization with Gloria about supporting patients who have housing needs when they're traveling for abortion care. And in this episode, we're going to talk to two other organizations that are doing equally amazing work, but kind of covering different logistical bases for what people need when they're traveling for care. We're going to hear today from Mike Bonanza. He is a pilot for an organization called Elevated Access, made up of small aircraft pilots that help get people to the care that they need, whether that's abortion care or gender-affirming care. And, you know, one of the logistical barriers for people flying from one place to another might be that they may not have an ID, or they may not feel comfortable going through the airport TSA system, or for a variety of reasons. They may not feel comfortable flying a commercial aircraft. And so this was a really cool interview.
Gosh, he was fun to talk to.
Kind of mind-blowing.
And, longtime listeners of the podcast will, of course, be on the edge of their seats about whether Mike will resolve the question of whether I, random man with no pilot training, can land an airplane. And he does provide that answer.
Spoiler alert, I was not surprised. But yeah, these are both great conversations, and we're lucky to be talking to both of these helpers.
So I'm Mike, the executive director and founder and volunteer pilot for Elevated Access. After George Floyd's murder by the police in Minnesota, my wife and I had been trying to figure out, what more could we do? Because protesting, voting, donating, all those kinds of things just didn't seem like it was doing enough. And she had a cousin who was running this series of workshops, anti-racism workshops, with cohorts of white folks to talk about our role in white supremacy and how, even if we aren't, say, using terms that we all know to be racist language, that doesn't mean that we're not upholding racism and white supremacy in other ways. And it was in that space where I learned about reproductive justice, which at the time I called myself pro-choice, but I haven't called myself pro-choice since then, other than to maybe really lay folks that understand what that means. I really talk more about reproductive justice in the sense that people should have the right to control their own bodies and their own futures. They have the right to have children, the right to not have children, and the right to raise children in safe and healthy environments. And it was in that context that I hadn't really thought about, especially, like I said, calling myself pro-choice, it's legal, so it's available. Well, I'm sure you both know that legal does not mean accessible. And so I figured there had to be people, organizations out there that were helping people travel to get access to abortion. And so I, with a little Google searching, found Midwest Access Coalition, who operates here in the Midwest, helps people travel to the Midwest, within the Midwest. They've been around for over 10 years now. And I said to them, volunteer for IT security and privacy work, which was a need you've got listed. But also as a pilot, I think a pilot might be able to help people travel, especially if they're having to drive longer distances. Because if you're talking about, the states now that are banned states, it wasn't like they had a lot of clinics. And so people that without a car that could make a long drive, or maybe without the time to make a long drive, would probably, could benefit from flying with a pilot. And so as Texas's SB 8 bounty law was coming online, I said, why don't we just go for a flight? And you can tell me if this is a good idea or a bad idea, because I'm not here to white knight or be anybody's savior or hero. I'm just here to, with a skill and a resource that I think would be helpful. And, I want you to tell me if it is or not. And so I took their executive director and another board member for a flight from a little kind of business airport on the north side of Chicago. And then we flew to a little rural airport just so they could see these different perspectives. Even the little old man behind the counter at the little tiny rural airport, didn't ask us who we were, why we were there, just asked if we needed any fuel or anything and let us go about our day. And they're like, okay, now we see how it would work. And now we see, the benefit, and you should go start an organization to do this. And I even said, you want me to do it as part of you all? Because, this is just be a part of your resources. Like, no. This is going to be national. We're regional. Go do this thing. And so here we are.
I think it would be really awesome to hear, for our audience to hear from a bro, why the pro-choice language is problematic.
Yeah. So, if you are someone who does not have the income to have a child, doesn't have the healthcare, when healthcare is getting more and more expensive and harder to access by itself, to raise a child healthily and safely, there are lots of things that make it not really a choice per se. you could say that they're not being forced to make a choice to not continue a pregnancy, but also if they're being pragmatic or practical about what's going on in their life. There are certainly people that would love to have a baby, but just know they aren't ready for a baby. They don't have the income or the household to bring a baby into. And it's not just about resources. It could be other factors too. It could even be thinking about what's going on in our country right now and be like, you know what, I don't want to bring a baby into this country. And so it's as much as I might want to have a baby. And so it's really, choice just trivializes it, I think, because it's way more complex than that. For anybody that didn't enter into a pregnancy knowing that they wanted to have a child, the decision is complex, and it is not as simple as like, yes, I want to have a baby. No, I don't want to have a baby. There's a lot more factors into it than that that really start to, in my mind, make it's not really about a choice. It's about like, this is the environment I'm in. This is the best decision I can make for myself.
One theme that runs across different organizations is that you took an idea that maybe other people had too, but there's something about it that made you take that idea and go with it, right? What do you think that there's something about your upbringing or what? I mean, it's almost like an entrepreneurial spirit, but I think in this case, it's like this tremendous generosity where you were like, no, I need to do this.
And there's definitely a few different factors to it. My wife definitely used to give me a hard time about like how many different, like, not wacky ideas I might have for like businesses I wanted to start or things like that. But she certainly saw that like I was, an idea generator kind of person. And so that's certainly a factor to it. This is the first time something actually turned into something, more substantial than just like a 1-year side hustle kind of a thing, for sure. But the part of it, the bigger part of it is just like, I was raised in a very conservative Christian household, and in college is where my deconstruction really accelerated, like it does for a lot of people. But really, what led me to deconstruct, a part of it was just like seeing how the churches that I might attend at the time, they weren't living Christian values in terms of like how to treat people, how people in need, might need support from other people, that, seeing people as humans and like their life is different than your life, and they might need something that you have that you can give them to help make their life better. And it's not about going into their life to insert yourself there, but it's like, hey, you need that. Do you need me to do something? Because if you do, I'm here for it. And if not, I can go about my day. But if you do, I'm here to help you because, we got to help each other out. And probably another part of it is that during Me Too, I was supporting a woman work colleague of mine, and we worked at a large university. So it has all sorts of, bureaucracy and process around, sexual harassment and those kinds of things. And I was trying to help her navigate that stuff because, I don't know, just process and things. Maybe it's the pilot part of me. Process like just kind of comes to me pretty easily. And so I was trying to help her, navigate those things. And she was expressing some frustrations, and I was trying to help her like, well, maybe we could do this or we could do that. And she's like, it's really great that you're doing this. I really love that you're here supporting me, but also you have connections around this university too that could be trying to change the system to make it less of a mess. And, for a lot of men, we see some issues as like women's issues, or as white person, you might be like, well, that's a black people's, kind of thing to try to solve or whatever. Or they're the ones that should be advocating. It's like, yes, those people that are most affected should be the ones talking. Those are the people we need to listen to. But that doesn't mean that for me as a white man, doesn't mean that I can't do the work. And so when I made our website live the Friday night before the draft opinion leaked, I didn't even have a donate button on that website because it was just going to be a free time thing. It was, at the time, it was me and 2 other pilots. And it's like, we can do what we can. And, but at least get the website out to try to recruit more pilots. By the end of that week of Dobbs, people are like, hey, I'm not a pilot. How can I support you? And so it was like, oh, I guess we're doing the donate button now. So yeah.
So we've cared for a lot of people that come to North Carolina, and the first time they've been on a plane is to fly here for their abortion care. So what's that experience like? Yeah.
So I've done a little bit over 20 flights. I think I can off the top of my head, I can only recall maybe one or two people that mentioned like, oh, I've flown on an airline before, but I've never been on a small plane. That, like you're saying, most people, the first time they've been on a plane, even this is their first time on an airplane. And so, when I reach out to them first, I'm, to make that connection when I accept the flight from the flight coordinators, so I'll reach out to the passenger like, hey, I'm your pilot for tomorrow or a couple days from now, whatever it is. And I'll say, let me know if you have any questions or if you have any concerns about anything. And sometimes they'll ask a question like, I'm really nervous about turbulence. Or I'm really nervous about, actually one person said they were really nervous about maintenance. Like, is the airplane going to break, kind of a thing. And I said, oh, well, we can talk more about that when we meet. Just know that, we as pilots, our airplanes have to do a pretty thorough inspection every year where they take things apart, look inside the wings, look inside the engine, all that kind of stuff to make sure everything is good. And then I said to her too, like before every flight, I also do kind of a walk around inspection to make sure everything's where it's supposed to be. There's nothing broken or anything like that.
Avionics power switch confirm off. Circuit breakers. Nothing popped. Everything's looking good.
If you want to do that with me, I'm happy to point out the different parts of the airplane and that kind of stuff. And so when we met and we did the walk around, said, okay, do you want to fly or do you want to not fly? And she says, oh, let's do it. I think I'm good. So, but for some people, like it's more like in person. I can sense the anxiety and the fear and and it could be about other stuff, but I usually assume it's about the flying part because that's the thing that's right in front of them. And so it's like, oh, you seem a little nervous about flying. Is there something about it that in particular that makes you nervous? So if somebody's like, I'm afraid of heights. I'm like, oh, I'm afraid of heights too. And then I get to explain how a pilot can be afraid of heights and how I don't feel, unsafe flying an airplane. It's like, so we can bond over that. Or for some people, it's like they're nervous about turbulence because they see videos online about turbulence and stuff. And especially if they've never flown before, they've probably only seen the really bad turbulence, videos. And so I'll explain to them about turbulence, so really just meeting them where they are. And like, and also telling them too, is like one of the advantages of being in a small airplane over an airline is like the only schedule here is your schedule. So if we get in the air and you change your mind about flying, or you're getting kind of nervous or not feeling well, we can land somewhere and take a break. We don't have to fly all the way to the destination. We're not stuck in this airplane other than like getting to the nearest airport where we can land. And so give them a little bit of that agency so that they feel a little bit less out of control and have a little bit of control over the situation. That usually helps quite a bit.
Bev, have you been on a small airplane?
I have. So I lived in Ecuador for 2 years and flew out to the Amazon basin a couple of times for some trips. And I used to be really afraid of flying. But flying on a small plane helped me overcome, like it's counterintuitive, right? Like, but flying on a small plane, like on one of the flights, I sat in the front with the pilot and, was wearing the headphones. And it was just like really cool, like being above like the Amazon with all these trees. It was just very peaceful. And I was like, oh, I can do this.
Yeah, the analogy I use with people is like going to the grocery store, because it's much more like going to the grocery store than it is to taking an airline flight. So when you go to the grocery store, you park in a small parking lot for free right next to the building. Even if you go to a big airport, it's going to be a separate building from the airline terminals. And so, you don't have all the traffic. Parking is almost always free. And then when you go inside, somebody might, ask if they can do anything for you, but you don't have to go to a ticket counter. You don't check any baggage. There's no TSA to go through. If your pilot's not already there, there's a nice lounge, you can wait in. A lot of them do have like sometimes free popcorn or cookies, that kind of thing. But you'll just wait there until the pilot gets there. And then once the pilot's there, you just meet up and you go out to the airplane and go. So like when you go to the grocery store, you go inside, you do your shopping. Nobody's asking you who you are, why you're there, why you're buying the things you're buying, who the person is that's with you, all those kinds of things. And I had a passenger once who was running pretty late, and I just texted her like, hey, no rush, just let me know if you're, your kind of general time that you're going to get here. And she was really apologetic. She's like, sorry, my 3-year-old's being a total pill today. I can't get him to get ready to leave. I said, no worries. I'm not leaving here without you. The weather's good. And, when you get to the airport, we leave and I'll get you to where you need to go. What
has the response from people been like to this service?
I do keep a little notebook that was inspired by my wife, actually. She had an abortion during her previous marriage. And one of the things she appreciated from the clinic is that they had, in the waiting room, had a little notebook that people could leave notes to, future clients. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to do that with my passengers. And I usually only get it out if they're nervous because it gives them a distraction, but also some words of encouragement. But for the folks that are really confident in things, I'll like, hey, you want to add an entry here to the book for somebody that comes after you? Some of the other feedback we get broadly, besides just feedback I've gotten from my flights, is we had a passenger say that they felt like Beyonce because of, they got to fly in their own private airplane and, get, treated like a queen bee for, for a day, that kind of a thing. Another passenger pilot shared this feedback with us. It was a mother and a daughter, and the daughter hadn't really said anything at all during the flight, and they got to their destination, and they got the engine shut down, and the daughter jumped out of the airplane, like ran over to the pilot's side of the airplane. It's like, that was so freaking awesome. And like, he'd clearly been just enjoying the whole thing and just taking it in. And obviously I didn't start the organization to give people joy, but you know what? Like, that makes an extra, special benefit that we can give people that, and we don't make the assumption that people are, going through it emotionally when it comes to traveling for an abortion. There's certainly stress of traveling for sure. But in terms of like, abortion may have been an easy decision for them, so we don't assume that they're going through, complex emotions around it necessarily. And so the thing I see the most is just people just completely chill and looking forward to, to the next stage of their journey. So.
We're also going to talk today with Amanda Rich, who's the executive director of Faith Roots, an organization based in New Mexico. And Faith Roots Reproductive Action advocates for bodily autonomy by shifting religious and spiritual narratives and engaging collaborative partnerships. They demand access to the full spectrum of reproductive health care, including abortion, for all persons.
And we'll hear about some creative solutions that they are coming up with to help overcome the barriers that patients face when they're traveling for care.
It's really an organization that sort of sprung out of the community, represents the community it serves, New Mexico, which extends to the people traveling there and really serves that community.
My name is Amanda Rich. I'm the executive director of Faith Roots Reproductive Action. We have a couple of main objectives in the community. We're an abortion fund, so we help people access abortion in New Mexico by providing flights, meals, hotel stays, gas money. And we're also an advocacy group, and we've been advocating for reproductive rights in New Mexico for more than 45 years.
Can you explain what an abortion fund is? We talk about them a fair amount, but I'm not sure we've defined it before.
Yeah, no, that's it. I'm so glad that you asked what an abortion fund is. So there's two main kinds of abortion funds. There are procedural support funds, and so they'll work directly with the clinic to provide vouchers that cover the medical costs of the abortion. And then there's what we call in the abortion fund world practical support, and that's everything else. That is rides, flights, gas money. If somebody gets a flat tire and they need emergency cash assistance to repair it, if they run out of gas 30 miles outside of Albuquerque, if they need help with childcare or anything that's not in the realm of paying for an actual procedure, that is considered practical support. And we are primarily practical support, but we do a tiny bit of procedural support funding, mostly in extreme circumstances or for folks in New Mexico who are what we call in the gap, where they don't qualify for Medicaid, but they also can't afford hundreds of dollars out of pocket for an unexpected medical procedure.
So Bev and I provide care in both Virginia and North Carolina. And so we see a ton of travelers. North Carolina is just like New Mexico is a state that a ton of people travel for care. And then when we go up to Virginia, we're seeing North Carolinians, and then we're seeing people coming from all sorts of states. And I mean, it's crazy. Well, it's not crazy. It actually makes a ton of sense how difficult it is to go get abortion care in a different place or get anything in a town you're unfamiliar with. Can you talk about what sort of motivated the need for practical support, or maybe some of the common things that you see? That you mentioned flat tires, but what are the other things that you see that people need?
Primarily the folks we're working with, right? They don't have resources. And so even taking a day off of work or finding childcare for a day to travel out of state, it takes a tremendous amount of effort and logistics on their part. And then you add on to that, sometimes we're working with folks who've never flown before. Now there's the real ID restrictions in place. So imagine like never having maybe left your home city or your home state before. And it's a tremendous amount of logistics and just emotional stress to try to come into a new city or a new state to access care. And so we have a lot of volunteer drivers who will pick someone up from the airport, take them to a hotel, drive them to their clinic appointment, drive them back to the hotel, take them back to the airport. And in the cases that we can't find volunteers, we rely on ride share services. And so it not only saves money to utilize volunteers, but there is a tremendous number of folks traveling who would prefer a volunteer. It takes out some of the worry or guesswork about a driver arriving at a clinic and feeling a certain kind of way or making an inappropriate comment. So we would prefer to use volunteers whenever we can, and it's a big part of our program right now. We also provide like menstrual supplies, hand out a lot of Plan B and contraception.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have a network of clergy who can provide counseling, spiritual care if people ask for it. This is always something we do never push this on folks, but we always offer it as an option on our intake form in the case that somebody wants to talk to a trusted person. We try to match them as closely to their faith as possible so they can really sort out what their feelings are, either pre or post abortion. Yeah, I think the big thing we want to show people, right? It's easy to tell someone you're not alone. We want them to really feel that they're not alone.
What advantages do you think coming from a background of faith has when you're interacting with patients about abortion?
Part of what we're trying to do is shift the narrative, right? Because the rise of white Christian nationalism has tried to own this narrative around abortion and around spirituality that we believe is false. And so how do we create a counter narrative? How do we shift that narrative to understanding abortion as a spiritual imperative, a moral imperative, abortion as a miracle, bodily autonomy as a right granted to all of us as humans, right? Free will as something that we were all granted as humans.
So in this work, what are some things that give you hope?
I believe the arc of justice is long. I believe we are on the right side of history. I think a lot about my time doing LGBTQ organizing and how we were faced with all these DOMAs, the Defense of Marriage Act, and how there's a federal DOMA and all the states were like making gay marriage legal, not making it legal, banning it. It was kind of very messy on the state level. And then we got federal protections. And in states where they would have never made same-sex marriage legal, they had to. And my hope and my dream, right, is that we will no longer be needed as an abortion fund, as an organization, because everyone will have access and it will be paid for and funded and free. And I believe in the long game. And so I think that some of what we're facing today with this current administration is actually backlash against all the progress we made, all the push, all of the advancement. And so now we're feeling the pushback against, rise of human rights, people of color in leadership, LGBTQ rights, right? Like I think about all of the anti-trans bills and how this just all feels very familiar to me, right? This old rhetoric, using a scapegoat, using a political hot button to push agendas and to push campaigns. It almost never works in the long term. Gay marriage wasn't the gay agenda. There were still people getting fired from their jobs for coming out when they pushed that in the election, and then what did we result in? We resulted in more rights. And so I feel like in the long game, in the long arc of justice, we will win. We will have protections. It will be free and accessible to all.
So Jonas and I have been having this like ongoing debate, and actually Jonas has been losing a lot of bets to me lately. Like
Three in a row.
3 bets in a row he's lost. So there was a survey that was done asking people about their confidence doing different tasks, and 50% of men say that they could land a plane.
I'm familiar.
And so we both find this fascinating. And the reason it's related to our work is that like a lot of legislators who know absolutely nothing about reproductive health project a lot of confidence when they make these laws about reproductive health. And so so while we both agree about that, Jonas thinks he can land a plane.
I think that this statistic is ridiculous and yet.
But you're not one of those people that's wrong. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
As it turns out.
66 knots, going to bring the nose up slowly, get into ground effect, holding that center line, a little bit of right rudder to keep us.
So I'm a pilot. I've been flying, like I said, for a little bit over 10 years. And if you put me into, just about any propeller-driven airplane, I'm pretty sure I could at least put it on the ground and we'd all walk away from it. The plane may not be usable again, but we'd all be able to walk away from it. Once you add a second engine or turn it into like a jet, I'd put us, probably about a 50-50 chance we're walking away from that. So Jonas, I'm sorry, I hate to tell you, but you probably couldn't.
Oh, man.
What else do you remember about Mr. Rogers? I know in the last episode we talked about Mr. Rogers and that being the inspiration of talking about helpers.
Well, we cheated and we just watched the end of an episode.
We just watched the end of the episode. I mean, of course we remembered.
It's a good
feeling to know you're alive. It's such a happy feeling. You're growing inside, and when you wake up, ready to say, I think I'll make a snappy new day.
It is unusual that you have such a palpable sense of someone's humanity when you talk to them. And I think that was the cool part for me in doing these interviews. We did them over a couple weeks, and to get to talk to these people who were creative, sacrificed a lot, went out of their way to help someone else in a way that was non-traditional. So I don't know. I really, that's what gave me hope about these organizations, these individuals.
Yeah. And they really see the humanity of people that are traveling for care, and they find ways to make them feel more human and feel cared for. And it's a time when people feel so uncared for and attacked. And so to see these people, finding creative ways to make a difference and making a difference, like making a real difference for people every day in ways that are, they're not on the news. They're not, highlighted in ways that others are. And they deserve all the good things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll have all of the links to those organizations if you decide you are inspired by one of their missions and you want to help them out. Please contribute and to help them continue to do the amazing work that they're doing.
Also excellent holiday options are Outlawed swag, t-shirts, and those t-shirts, mugs, stickers, which we'll provide links to in the show notes, as well as a new section called Bev's Favorite Merch, where she will be providing links to some of her favorite abortion t-shirts.
Oh yeah, I can do that. Yep. All right.
Opinions expressed on this podcast are our own. Philanthropy keeps this podcast ad-free. To donate, you can find a link in the show notes.
This podcast is executive produced by us, Dr. Bev Gray, Dr. Jonas Swartz, and Jane Marie. Production by Little Everywhere. Thanks to our amazing musicians, Nick Thorburn, Patrick Ford, and Maker for our score. And extra special thanks to all the helpers who are out there making a difference in the world every day.